Hi everyone. So I'm Nicole here in the Microsoft practice at Bytes, and what I'm going to be doing in this video is just giving you a quick overview of Defender for Endpoint and what you can expect to see when you adopt some of the Defender for Endpoint plans. Um, so at the start, you'll notice that this is the home page, which we covered in another video. If you'd like to see an overview of it, please go ahead and look at that video. Um, when you adopt Defender for Endpoint, the first thing you'll notice is a lot of the incidents that it picks up are now centralized in one place. And that applies to any of the Defender products, right? Which is probably the biggest advantage of using all of the Defender products together. So you'll notice all of the incidents that are picked up are now centralized. You'll have details of the severity of the incidents, any assets that are impacted. But what you'll also see is these detection sources. Now, for some incidents, it can be just Defender for Endpoint, but you'll notice with this one, it's Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Office, Defender XDR, and Identity Protection, all involved in addressing what this incident is. So when Defender for Endpoint picks up an incident and it goes into its investigative state, it's going to try and source as much information as it can related to that particular incident. So if we open up this SAP financial process manipulation attack, immediately you'll see Defender endpoint detection and response at work. And that's going to give you the details of the attack story and all of the alerts combined to define what's made this incident. So you'll have a lot of information around what emails were involved, what URL was clicked, and you have quite a nice incident graph to show you how this incident unfolded. You can click on the user and then dive into what exactly that user did. But a lot of this information is also collated from a number of different areas. So anything like Defender for Office, for example, if there was an email involved, Defender for Office would send some of that details to this incident. Um, Cloud apps, like it mentioned earlier, was probably related to a site that they potentially visited that was involved in this incident as well. So you can look at any of these elements, you can click on any of these elements, get details around this particular user, details around this IP, and that just gives you a graphical representation of what what happened in this particular attack story. Within this incident, you'll now see as well all of the assets related to it. So any users that were involved, in this case, it might be a number of different users clicked a link, or it's spread from one user to another, any mailboxes involved, and you can drill down and investigate what's happened with all of these users and mailboxes. The investigations page, a lot of this is automated investigations, and you'll see some of these, the detection source is Defender for Office, so it was related to an email or a URL that was clicked within an email, and it will go off and trigger its own investigations and let you know how far that's gone. So for example, the compromised user account in this scenario was remediated, and it might be that that account was disabled. For example, if you've configured it to automatically remediate and automatically take actions, that's something you can now see as well. So within the same incident, the evidence and response is all of the evidence it gathered for it to determine that this was an incident that happened. So you can see any of the IP addresses that are involved. Thank you for that, Defender, for not showing that evidence right now. Um, any of the cloud applications, any of the email clusters, and a lot of that detail will come through as part of that investigation that it runs. Also quite useful is any recommended actions that it thinks you need to take, and it will list out those recommended actions, and not just for a particular user, but if those recommended actions apply to everybody, for example, enabling network protection as an option. Um, you can then see which devices are involved, which devices it recommends you do that on, if it recommends you quarantine certain messages. Those are some of the actions you can take there. And then the summary is basically an overview of the incident at a high level. Quite recently, you would have seen that they have added Copilot or Copilot for security. We can have totally separate conversations around Copilot for security. But if you go down the Copilot for security route, as soon as you open an incident, you'll see an incident summary and it will tell you what's happened. It will also give you a guided response on what actions you need to take, like emails you need to send to confirm the activity from different users. If you need to reset someone's password, for example, this is some of the things that Copilot for Security is doing. But at a high level, that's what you can expect to see from a Defender incident. And this is also, again, assuming you have Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. The other things you can do and see with Defender for Endpoint around threat intelligence is the threat analytics page. This is probably one of the more interesting things from my side, because it's showing you any of the latest threats happening around the world. Today, for example, it's Mango Sandstorm targets, and this is an Israel-based organization, but it's not applicable to your environment. There are no devices in your environment that are affected. So when you see that there is a high impact threat and there's some red and green alerts, this means it is applicable to your environment, and it will show you how and which devices are exposed to that and give you some of the recommended actions you can take. So, for example, with this particular threat, there's some active incidents. You can see any incidents related to it. More importantly, you can see any assets that are impacted and information around that. And you can also then take any recommended actions to mitigate for this happening within your environment. So that's some of the info on threat analytics. Also with Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, you will have vulnerability management. As a quick overview, this will show you any of the applications that are missing patches or have patches that are exploitable, or software that's exploitable, and you'll have a high level overview of what you need to attack first, which is nice. So in this case, Microsoft Edge Chromium, 67% of this environment hasn't had this update. And you can also track the remediation activities, which is quite a nice thing. Assuming you're using Intune, you can see when these patches were deployed, and then you can further use Intune to carry on and fulfill those tasks by creating packages to complete those updates. An overview of the vulnerable software in your environment, most exposed devices. And for example, if you click on one of these devices, what it will do is it will show you any information it's picked up relating to that device. So any incidents that are linked to it, it will explain why it's a high level exposure level because of the discovered vulnerabilities potentially. So you can see a list of why it said that. And in this case, it's quite a high severity vulnerability. And if there's any configuration policies that haven't been configured, that's the kind of information you'll see there. And you'll notice the pop-up from Copilot on the right showing an overview of the device and the vulnerable software. So that's a high-level view of vulnerability management and some of the remediations you can take there. And then lastly, on Defender for Endpoint was the web protection feature. So in the settings, you can also configure web content filtering policies. And this is mainly around if you want to block websites. So if you have a secure web gateway, potentially you don't need this. But if you have no web security at all, you can use Defender for Endpoint to block gambling or block criminal activity, block hacking, and then configure that for your users. So that's Defender for Endpoint at a high level. Of course, if you want to go into a lot more detail around these, then please reach out to us and I'll happily go through these demos in more detail. But I hope you enjoyed that video. And if you're interested in any of the other videos, please do have a watch and reach out to us. Thanks.